Congressman, let's start with the coronavirus response in Washington. The HEROES Act is already through the House. Republicans in the Senate say they're not going to take it up. What new legislation could come out of Capitol Hill with the stimulus involved that will actually go into action to help people on the ground here?
Well, thank you for that question. As you know, Nevada has been one of the hardest hit states from the standpoint of the impact of the COVID-19 on our economy. We have the highest rate of unemployment. We were high of 30%, which is the highest on record that we've had. And I've been focused from day one on making sure that we get the relief and assistance to Nevada families, Nevada workers, and Nevada small businesses so that they could get through this pandemic and its effects on our economy. As you indicated, Congress has passed 6 bills in the House, 4 of them in a bipartisan way, and they were signed into law. There are 2 other bills, one, the HEROES Act, which is still pending in the Senate, and there are ongoing negotiations that are happening. But unfortunately, Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans have really stood in the way of getting the extension for unemployment, the additional direct cash payments, funding for more small businesses, and more direct relief for our state and local governments. And so that is what we have voted for. I do believe that we have to come together. This is not about party or partisanship. It's about the people who are relying on Congress to do our job during this very difficult time in our nation.
It's just a quick follow-up. How much time is there? It seems like there's a bit of a threshold here where at some point politics has to give way to conclusion, to action. What can you as a congressman do on the Democratic side to at least find some middle ground to get the wheels in motion?
You're absolutely right. Well, the House voted now 3 months ago on our package, and the Senate still hasn't acted on theirs. But as you indicated, the reality is unemployment benefits expired. There are many small businesses that are still struggling, people who want to return to work but need to do so safely. So my focus has been to get our leadership on both sides in the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, to work together. And today, in fact, I just submitted a letter to our leadership asking them to bring up my bill, the Back on Your Feet Act. This bill would extend unemployment, but also provide a back to work bonus of up to $3,600 for people who are able to return to work safely to be able to cover the expenses for housing, transportation, childcare, and healthcare expenses, which a lot of people have fallen behind on.
With regards to your re-election campaign, your opponent in this race wants to hold China more accountable or completely accountable for the coronavirus and what has taken place. How much accountability do you think belongs to the Chinese government, and what kind of, I don't know if punishment is the right word, but what kind of action do you think should be taken legislatively against China with regards to this pandemic?
Well, it's without question that more should have been done, as China knew there were certain events that were taking place and that was not always shared openly and transparently. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of our leaders here in the United States. When we did learn of this deadly virus and its impact, the fact that the current administration did not do enough at the very beginning of this process to protect Americans from the virus. We now have lost more than 170,000 people to the virus, many of whom we could have avoided. The fact that despite the efforts by the Congress to pass funding for a national testing strategy, there still to this day is not a national testing strategy in place. The fact that there was not adequate protective equipment for our frontline healthcare workers. And to this day, many of those healthcare facilities, especially in our nursing homes, are ill-equipped to confront this virus. So yes, there is plenty of responsibility to go around, but my focus has been on making sure that we protect people's health care, we protect their paychecks, we protect their housing and their food security, because those are the issues that the majority of people in my district talk to me about on a regular basis.
There have been some issues raised with transparency with the PPP that it went through, and a variety of issues related to transparency from that, not just in Nevada, but kind of nationwide. What provisions do you want to see put in place to increase transparency to the public for coronavirus relief funding moving forward?
Great question. Well, first, there is a committee, a select committee on oversight of the COVID funding that has been put in place. Again, a bipartisan committee. It's chaired by Congressman Jim Clyburn, the House Majority Whip. They've actually gotten more than $100 million of taxpayer funding and loans returned back, paid back to the Treasury from businesses that should not have gotten it. But in Nevada, let me just say, the Paycheck Protection Program was a godsend for many small businesses. In fact, more than 40,000 businesses in Nevada, according to the Small Business Administration, did receive a Paycheck Protection loan. And most of that loan will be able to be forgiven because many of those businesses will use it to pay their payroll or cover other eligible expenses, helping to save nearly 500,000 jobs in Nevada. So overall, that was a very successful program. I'm proud to have voted for that, and I'm proud of the results that it has provided to our small business community. We need transparency, though, for every dime of funding, particularly to big corporations and corporations that did not meet the eligibility. There actually was a provision in the law that said that if you could have found financing through another source other than from the PPP, then you would not be eligible. And still, some of those businesses took advantage, and they should not have done so.
Let's switch gears a little bit to immigration and DACA. We've seen what has been happening out of the White House, the rollback of DACA that's taking place right now. There has been a challenge to getting immigration legislation passed. There's been a lot of other issues on the table, to be sure. What do you want to tell, and what can you promise to your voters if you're reelected that you'll be able to do in Congress to address issues on the border and address issues with Dreamers?
So first and foremost, this is a very important issue, and it goes to the values of who we are as a nation. We are a nation of immigrants, and we need our laws to reflect that. I am a sponsor of the Dream and Promise Act, which has passed out of the House, and I also support comprehensive immigration reform. I believe that we need to provide a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented individuals, an earned pathway where people have to make sure they pay taxes and met other obligations to earn that pathway, and to also make sure that we are providing proper funding for our security of our nation. That includes the southern border, but it also includes the northern border to Canada. It includes all of our ports, because many of those are not adequately secure now. They have not been. This is, again, not a partisan issue. This is about people and making sure that we keep families together. That has been the ethic and the value that I have tried to work from on the issue of immigration. This is about families and keeping families together, not tearing them apart.
There are certainly DACA ties to your district, to Las Vegas, but there are also ties to what happened at the border months ago to Nevada, in terms of some of the folks from the border being brought to, I think it's the facility out in Pahrump. What do you think needs to be done, or how do you think that could have been done, should have been done differently? Was the border compromised by the actions, and what can be done to rectify that?
Well, let me begin by saying I'm actually doing a tour of the facility in Pahrump here in the next few weeks to see firsthand, as I've done previously. I've taken trips to the border to see firsthand the impacts. My focus is children, keeping children safe, ensuring that they have adequate food and secure and safe facilities, that they're not being abused or taken advantage of, and where definitely appropriate, making sure that they are connected to their parents, especially their mother. My biggest concern is that some of the way that this administration has approached this has really been with the intent of tearing families apart, of separating families, of putting children away from their parents, and some children who still to this day have not been reunited with their families. That is, in my mind, inhumane. It does not reflect the values of who we are as a nation, and there's a better way to do it. And the way to do it is to pass the Dream and Promise Act that the House has already voted for. There was bipartisan vote for that bill too. I want to just underscore, it was not 100% Democrats. And to get the Senate to take up that bill or a version of it. We get that we may not get 100% of what we proposed, but the Senate, led by Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans, cannot ignore this issue. It's too serious of an issue. Dreamers are counting on us. And let's talk about who these dreamers are. They are our neighbors. They are the teachers in many of our schools. They are nurses. They are literally the people who have been working on the front lines during this pandemic. So they are a part of the fabric of our community, and we need to be there for them, and we need to make sure that we honor the commitment that was made under the DACA so that they can continue to contribute to all of our communities and to our society.
Let's quickly get back to your race for re-election. Quite simply, what sets you apart from Jim Marchand?
Well, let me be very clear. There's a big contrast between me and my opponent. First and foremost, I have a strong record of always delivering for the middle-class families in Nevada's 4th District, which is a very diverse district, demographically and geographically. My opponent is wrong on healthcare. He wants to eliminate the Affordable Care Act. He supports attempts to take away pre-existing condition protections under the Affordable Care Act. He's wrong on gun safety legislation. He's heavily supported by the gun lobby, where I am supported by organizations like Moms Demand Action and the Brady Campaign and Giffords and others. He's wrong on the relief package that we have been voting on in Congress. He thinks that there should not be a federal role to help families that are struggling right now. And I've been working every single day to provide those benefits, whether they be unemployment, insurance benefits, or support to our frontline workers or to our small businesses. He thinks that there should not be federal support at the level that we've passed it. So for those reasons, I think the voters have a very clear choice. The contrast could not be clearer in this election. And I want to just encourage people to participate. We're going to have another all-mail ballot process. So people will have an opportunity to do that or to vote early at one of the approved polling locations. And I encourage everyone to get out and make sure that their voice is heard in the upcoming election.
Just two more questions real quick, Congressman. One, let's talk quickly about public lands. There's an ongoing issue down by Laughlin right now with Spirit Mountain, but in District 4, the Desert National Wildlife Refuge and the efforts by the Air Force to expand that, we're familiar with that. Talk about your position on that issue and how you would try and address it if you're elected for another 2 years.
Well, as I am the sole member on the Natural Resources Committee from Nevada's delegation and actually helped to lead the effort to beat back the attempt to turn the Desert Wildlife Refuge into an effort that literally would have put it entirely within the domain of the U.S. Air Force. And to be clear, I've worked very closely with Nellis and Creech Air Force Base, the commanders there, and we are continuing to work to ensure that their needs are met. The amendment that ultimately was passed in the National Defense Appropriations Act, which I authored, provides for an interlocal agreement between the Air Force, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the tribes, environmental groups, including the sportsmen and other stakeholders locally, to actually have a management plan for the Desert Wildlife National Refuge. So I'm very proud that we were able to protect Nevada's interest in this regard, while also ensuring our national security through Nellis Air Force Base. I'm also a member of the Ways and Means Committee as well as the Budget Committee, and so I've worked on those committees to make sure that Nevada's voice is heard and that we are getting our share of the resources that Nevada families, workers, and small businesses desperately need.
Finally, Congressman, I would like to address something that you've admitted to and you've apologized for to some extent, a high-profile personal issue that came out some time ago. It's been brought up to some extent during the campaign, certainly by critics of yours. Don't want to get too deeply into the issues of the affair, but what does it say about your judgment as a congressman that this has happened and you've acknowledged it? Does it have any weight at all for voters? Should it have any weight up for voters on your judgment for another 2 years?
Well, let me say first and foremost, I love my wife dearly and my family. And my first obligation is to them and in ensuring that we heal and that we remain together as a family. And I have focused in doing just that. I also take my responsibility in serving the people of Nevada's 4th District very seriously. And I have remained steadfast in doing my job and advocating for the issues that matter most to my constituents, from healthcare to making sure that people can return to work safely, to making sure that there are adequate resources and funding to our state and local governments, including our schools, particularly during this pandemic. And that we're focused not just now and what we have to do to get through this pandemic, but also on the future and the priorities of how we're going to build back stronger. So I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've acknowledged those, but I've also remained committed to doing my job as the representative of Nevada's 4th District. And I'm asking the people of Nevada to continue to support me in doing that work that I care deeply about on behalf of all of them.
I believe we will leave it there. Congressman, thanks again for chatting with us. Sorry it went a little longer than I expected, but I'm sure we'll talk again in the future. Appreciate it.
You too. Appreciate it, John.
Take care of yourself.